This is Tom Lane, BM2 Software's Vice President of Marketing. I would like to welcome everybody to today's Sage Alerts and Workflow webinar. Before I introduce today's presenter, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Because of the number of attendees we have on today's webinar, everyone's phones will stay on mute. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them into the question window that you see on the lower right of your screen. We'll try to answer everyone's questions at the end of the webinar. If we're unable to get to everybody's questions, we'll follow up with each of you individually after the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded. As soon as the recording is available, we'll post it on the customer content page of our website and send you an email to let you know when it's available to be downloaded. On that note, I would like to introduce today's presenter, Don Farber. He's the Vice President of Sales and Marketing with VineyardSoft, the authors of Sage Alerts and Workflow. And he's going to give you an overview on Sage Alerts and Workflow. On that note, I'll hand it over to you, Don.
Thanks very much, Tom. And Tom, let me start out by just making sure that my voice is coming through loud and clear and that my volume is satisfactory.
Yes, you sound great.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. All right. So my thanks to everyone for participating in today's webinar. Just to give you a little bit of information about how we're going to proceed, this webinar is going to be divided into roughly two parts. We're going to start out with a brief overview of Sage Alerts and Workflow and the concept of business activity monitoring. We'll talk about how folks are using this solution, how it works, how it's licensed and priced, etc. Then we will jump into the product itself for a brief product demonstration. And each of those sections, the PowerPoint overview, the product demo, will take about 17 or 18 minutes apiece, which should leave us lots of time at the end for Q&A. As I go through my presentation, you will, on occasion, hear a couple seconds of silence from my side of the phone. That's just me grabbing a quick sip of my coffee for a momentary caffeine boost. So with that, let's get right to it. So what I'd like to focus on for today's presentation is the concept of making better business decisions. And I know that's perhaps a rather general category, but by better, what I really mean is a more informed business decision and a more timely business decision. Because if you're able to accomplish those two things, an increase in the intelligence or the timeliness of your responses to various business conditions, you're basically able to provide better solutions, better decisions. You're able to increase productivity and profitability and reduce lost time and money. So, as you can see from the center of the current slide, the agenda, the topics that we'll be covering, and let's start off with a quick informal survey. I'd like you to consider the following three questions. Number one, when was the last time you had a customer who had changed their buying habits, or they stopped buying from you altogether and you didn't know about it, or it took you a number of months after the fact to realize, gee, what happened to this particular customer? Or, gee, why did they all of a sudden drop their purchases from us to 50% of what it used to be? For that matter, when was the last time you had to write off a customer's receivables because you had been selling to them, and not really keeping enough of an eye on the fact that they were having difficulty paying you? At first they were over 30 days past due, then 60, then 90, then you were having trouble contacting them, and eventually you had to write off bad debt. And lastly, when was the last time one of your staff or colleagues changed a customer's credit limit or credit status, or changed some other critical piece of information, terms, code, etc., for one of your clients without first getting the necessary approval? Now, we can take those three informal questions and kind of reduce them to the following. When was the last time that something happened within your business that cost you time or cost you money, and it was something that you could have prevented if only you had known about it sooner? Well, this really all resolves itself into one concept, and that is that you don't want to catch yourself saying, if only we had known. That's just a really bad thing to hear from yourself or to hear from your colleagues. I tend to refer to it as the V8 moment, which is fine for V8. Surprises are good for birthdays, but they're really not nearly as good when you're talking about your ERP data, your accounting and related information. So what's the problem? Why is it that people are experiencing this if only we had known moment in their business life? Well, what we're able to determine is that for most organizations, in order for you to know what's going on in your business, in order for you to know about those clients who have stopped buying from you, in order to know about those clients who are having difficulty meeting their financial obligations, most organizations have to go out and look for it. You have to proactively run reports and queries, and sometimes these reports can be 10, 20, 30 or more pages long, and you've got to look for just those one or two aha moments or instances where you say, okay, this is something that requires our attention. Unfortunately, with the current state of the economy, we're all trying to run rather slim, mean, and lean these days. Very few organizations have the time to run or review these reports or run these online queries looking for that V8, that aha moment. So, do you have that amount of time today to run that, to run those reports and look through them, or to run countless queries looking for that one exception to your normal business activities? I know I don't. And in fact, especially today, where organizations are trying to do more with less, very few organizations do have that luxury. So that leads us to the following conclusion. If most organizations don't have the time to spend to proactively run reports and run business analyses to look to see what's going on within your business, instead, you need a way to be automatically told what's going on in your business. It's kind of an interesting phrase to say because it's not all that complex. It's not, as it shows at the bottom of this slide, it's not rocket science. If I don't have time to go out and look for these things, I need these things, these conditions, these activities to come proactively to me, to tell me. And I tend to refer to that as giving a voice to your data. Can you imagine if you're able to take your ERP solution and somehow enhance it, whereby it could proactively tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, this client significantly lowered their purchases this month versus their average monthly sales based upon the last 6 months of activity. How nice would it be to have your ERP application, your Sage application, tap you and say, this customer is really having trouble meeting their financial obligations. They're now past 60 or past 90 days. If you could give your data a voice, that voice can give you 3 benefits. Number 1, it can automatically alert you to potential problems. That customer who is not paying you on a timely basis, that customer who's changed their buying habits. But at the same time, I always like to say an alert doesn't always have to be about something that's negative. An alert can also uncover opportunities. It can tell you, gee, this client has increased their purchases from you. Maybe we can present them with an incentive or a promotional plan to help encourage them to purchase even more. How nice would it be to look at what your clients have been doing with you and get proactively presented with potential opportunities to further increase that revenue from those clients. Thirdly, and I want to take a moment to talk about this, the third bullet on the current slide, a voice that speaks for you when you're too busy with all your other work responsibilities. Have you ever felt that it would be really nice if you were able to survey your customers on a periodic basis and find out what they like, what they're happy with, as well as what they don't like? Wouldn't it be nice just to be able to touch that customer, your customers, on a more frequent basis? Because analyses show that the more contact, the more frequent touch you're able to keep with your customers, the more you're going to be able to retain and grow their business. But unfortunately, again, we get to the same problem of most organizations operating lean and mean, and we just don't have the resources to speak to our clients for us when we're busy doing everything else that we need to do every day. So what is it that this voice could potentially do? What are the tangible business benefits that you could realize? Number one, this is a biggie. This is one of the most common ones, reduce time to payment. Think about it. How do you today handle customers who are having difficulty paying you in a timely basis? For a lot of organizations, their only resort is at the end of every month, they run a customer statement or they generate their invoices and they send that information out to their clients. But gee, how nice would it be on, say, a weekly basis to identify any customers who have invoices that are more than 60 or 90 or 120 days old and automatically send some kind of a reminder to the customer to say, hey, by the way, you're getting severely past due on these invoices. The appropriate invoices are attached to this email. Here's your statement that summarizes everything. Please pay as soon as you can. So just by, again, touching that customer on a more frequent basis to remind them of what they owe you, you can reduce that time to payment. Number two, automatically delivering relevant forms and documents, invoices, statements, purchase orders, dunning notices. There's a lot of stuff, and by stuff I mean forms and documents that you need to send out to customers on a periodic basis. Whose job is it to do that? And is that a job that's currently being done manually? Is it the responsibility of someone in your organization at the end of every month to print customer statements, to stuff them into envelopes, and to mail those off? What about looking at possibly going to email and having those statements automatically generated and delivered every month or on whatever recurring basis is appropriate? There's a lot of information in your ERP system that is date sensitive. You make deliveries on a certain date. Customers need things by a certain date. You promise certain dates for certain activities. Being able to ensure that those promises, that those deliveries are made on a timely basis, again, ideally you should be doing that today, but often that's the responsibility of someone to do manually. If you could automatically monitor those promises that you've made and deliver information, communicate that out to your customers, it would be awfully handy. Item number 4, identifying errors in order entry. We're all familiar with the phrase garbage in, garbage out, but the more that you can capture erroneous data or missing data, unapproved price breaks or discounts, we're talking bottom line here. So the more we can increase the integrity of the data that's stored in your Sage ERP system, the bottom line is the more value you're going to get out of it. And here's a question for you. Do you have someone within your organization whose job it is to run and distribute your analytical reports, your AR aging reports, your balance sheets, your check register, things of that nature? If so, think about automating the process of generating and delivering those reports and free up that person's time for tasks that are uniquely demanding of a person's intellect. Redundant tasks should be automated. Number 6 is one of my favorites in terms of what this voice can do for us. Sometimes the most critical things that we need to be aware of is something that hasn't happened. And I'll give you the number 1 example here. Wouldn't it be nice to know about a recurring customer of yours who has not purchased within a certain number of days? Very often by the time you discover that a customer has stopped purchasing from you, they're already buying from someone else. It's too late to get them back. So the sooner that you can identify this without having to go out proactively looking for it, the greater chance you have to increase customer retention. Obviously, looking at stock levels, the time to know about decreasing stock is when you're approaching your reorder level, not when you're below it or when you're out of an item. So being able to say, I need to know when I'm within 10, 15, or 20% of my reorder is critical. Or even looking at what you have on hand, but what you have promised to go out on orders in the coming weeks, balanced with what you have coming into your organization from your vendors. And finally, In your business activities, do you utilize email? Do your customers or prospects have a way to send email to generic addresses like info@yourcompany.com or support at, sales at, accounting at? If so, whose job is it to review those incoming emails? Or are those email accounts, those generic accounts, simply black holes where emails go to die, which is too often the case? Well, this voice that we're talking about, in order to be truly efficient, shouldn't cost $50,000 a year, doesn't require health care or paid vacation, and certainly isn't going to call in sick on a Monday morning after a particularly riveting football game on Sunday evening. So what is it that we're talking about this voice doing? We're really talking about this voice doing 4 things. Number 1, automatically watching over your ERP and related information, identifying those potential problems and opportunities that exist in that data, communicating that information out to yourself, your colleagues, and even your clients, and finally, fourthly, but not at all least, is automatically acting on the problem or opportunity at hand. Because most of us know if we're having a customer who's not paying in a timely fashion, what we need to do is we automatically need to send them their invoice or their statements in a more frequent basis, automatically reminding them to pay up. And maybe even if a client gets severely past due, more than 60, 90, or 120 days, let's automatically put them on credit hold, because the last thing I want to do is sell more product to a customer who's not paying us. So this voice, as we're calling it, is the solution called Sage Alerts and Workflow. This product name that you see you may not be familiar with. You might be more familiar with its previous name called Sage Knowledge Sync. But call it Knowledge Sync, call it Sage Alerts and Workflow, which is the latest name for this technology. We're talking about the same solution. What does the solution do? Well, it watches over your ERP data, and you can see here invoices that are overdue, stock that's running low, zero balance sales orders. You can read these as well as I can read them to you, so you'll be pleased to know that I'm not going to read down the list. But it is safe to say that any business condition that's important to you can be automatically monitored, identified, and responded to by Sage Alerts and Workflow. Now, although we're talking about kind of primarily monitoring your ERP, your financial and related data, one of the neat things about Alerts and Workflow is that it can look at all of your business's data. I was actually giving a webinar just earlier this morning to a group of people who are using financial systems such as yours, and also a human resource management application. And what they wanted to know was when a salesperson was basically recording a higher level of sick time, absenteeism, was that also being reflected in their sales numbers? Because what they said to me was, Don, if we got a sales rep who's not coming into the office, but their sales numbers are still high, we have no problem with that whatsoever. However, if a person is recording a higher level of absenteeism and their sales numbers are suffering, then we've got a problem. So again, Alerts and Workflow is an enterprise-wide monitoring system. So whether it's your financial data, human resource data, sales, customer service, if you have homegrown applications, Alerts and Workflow can look at all of those sets of data, see what's happening, identify those critical activities, and automatically respond to them. And how about that? Here we've actually got the example. I anticipated my own presentation here. I should have known better. Here we've got an example talking about that cross-application monitoring. Because truly, it's often, you need to take a look at the whole picture. Sometimes you can't judge success or failure based upon just one part of your business or one department. Look at the whole picture and then determine the appropriate action that needs to be taken. Now, when we talk about Alerts and Workflow, I mentioned that it's an enterprise-wide monitoring and response system. We talked about monitoring accounting data, sales data, HR data. But let's not forget, there's another important area of data coming into your organization, incoming email. I talked earlier. Do you have generic email accounts, info at, support at, sales at? Whose job is it to monitor those incoming email messages, figure out, are they important, who needs to respond to them, what does that response need to be? Alerts and Workflow lets you automate the process whereby those incoming emails get They come in, Alerts and Workflow looks through them, sees who they're from. Are they a customer? Are they a supplier? Are they a prospect? Sees what the person is asking for, actually looks at the content of the message itself, and then determines how that message needs to be responded to, whether it's just forwarding that on to the appropriate account manager or possibly automatically sending back to a customer requested information like pricing or product details. Now, Alerts and Workflow, because it is so focused on identifying conditions and delivering the corresponding information to the right people, it has a very important component called alert failover. Because, you know, sometimes people change their email addresses or they get a new cell phone. And if you've got someone on the road and the only way to reach them is to send them a text message on their cell phone, if they just change their cell phone number, you're not going to reach them. Alerts and Workflow will check to make sure your alerts successfully reach their intended recipients and destinations, and if not, it can actually fail over those alerts to an alternate recipient. And Alerts and Workflow even goes beyond monitoring data and email to monitoring your operating system, because sometimes the greatest impact to the productivity and profitability of your staff is your own hardware and software. If one of your employees has let their mailbox fill up and no one else can send them email, that's a problem. Now, these alerts that we're talking about, you might think, well, email. And you'd be right. Alerts and Workflow can send out alerts via any email system, whether it's Outlook or Exchange or Gmail or Lotus Notes Mail. But email, as you can see, is just one of the various methods that Alerts and Workflow can deliver its information. I talked about text messaging to a cell phone. You see that here. Even using some of the latest social networking tools, such as Twitter. IM or screen pop, just popping up a message right on someone's screen so they don't even have to open up email to find out the details, and even executive dashboards. Now, these alerts that get sent out, sometimes a simple one-liner like this customer is having problems meeting their financial obligations. They're currently overdue in the amount of $15,000 over 90 days. Sometimes that's sufficient, but sometimes you want even more details in your alerts. You want to be able to generate perhaps a client's aged receivables status. Well, all of your existing reports, your AR aging report, stock status report, GL reports, those all can be triggered, generated, and auto-delivered by Alerts and Workflow. And that not only includes your reports, it also includes all of your standard forms and documents. If you've got a nice-looking invoice designed in Crystal, Alerts and Workflow can use that and automatically send out that invoice using that form to the appropriate customers when they place their orders. And you can see some of the other forms and documents that Alerts and Workflow can generate and deliver. One of my favorite uses of this integration with reports is down at the bottom right. I want to trigger a report, but based upon certain conditions. If a client gets to within 10% of their credit limit, then generate an AR aging report for that client and send that report out to the client's account manager and our finance department. The final component of Alerts and Workflow, as you might guess, is the workflow component. And by workflow, we mean the ability to go back into your ERP application or even other applications and actually add or update information or schedule appropriate follow-up tasks. You know, if a client is overdue, yes, you want to notify their sales rep. Yes, you want to notify the client. You might even want to notify your finance department or a collections agency. But how about automatically putting that client on credit hold so no additional orders are allowed for them? That's an example of what we consider workflow. So the entire picture of Sage Alerts and Workflow looks like the following. The top half, as you can see, are those sources of data that can be monitored from application databases like your Sage ERP application to incoming email, etc. The bottom half of this illustration shows the manners by which Alerts and Workflow can respond, triggering alerts down at the bottom center, automatically generating and deliver relevant forms, documents, and reports, or executing triggered updates or workflow. So there are other alerts and workflow type solutions on the market. What is it that truly distinguishes the Alerts and Workflow solution from Sage? Well, there are Letterman has his top 10 list. We've got our top 12 list. And I'm not going to go through each of these in excruciating detail because, again, you can read them as well as I can read them to you, but just to touch upon some of them. Alerts in workflow can do very sophisticated data mining, more than just an invoice that's overdue, identifying a customer who hasn't ordered, identifying customers who've changed their buying habits. Alert delivery methods, we've mentioned a number of those, but how about also being able to say, Monday through Friday, I want to be notified at my work email address, but on Saturdays or Sundays or before or after work hours, I want to be notified at a home, perhaps a Gmail address. The automatic generation and delivery of Crystal reports, forms, and documents we've touched upon. When we jump into the Alerts and Workflow application, which we'll do in just a couple of minutes, you'll see that you don't have to be a programmer in order to implement and configure the system for your own specific needs. Let's touch upon some of the other differences. You may have mentioned back on the slide that talked about alert delivery methods, something called dashboards. Sometimes you just want to have a window up on your desktop that says, here are today's scheduled deliveries, or here are today's orders. Here are the invoices that are now 60 or 90 days past due. So that's one of the additional alert delivery methods. Job streams, skipping down to the third item on this slide. Very often in the ERP world, there are multi-step processes that you need to follow in a very specific order, and we refer to these as job streams, something that's missing from just about all other alerts and workflow solutions. The purchase order process is, to me, a perfect. When you need to issue a purchase order, it needs to be issued. It needs to be reviewed by a number of different people who need to approve it or reject it at a certain point. After it gets those approvals, it needs to get sent off to the vendor. So in Alerts and Workflow, you can set up those multi-step business processes. And finally, I'll actually just jump down to the very last item on the current slide. I tend almost never to talk about futures in a product coming developments, but since this module is in its final state of being tested, I do feel the luxury to discuss it. Alerts in Workflow is adding a completely graphic alert delivery method. So your dashboards can now include all your pie charts, bar charts, line charts, etc. And it's all done with a wizard-driven graphic designer. We do currently support graphic alerts, but they relied upon Crystal reports to create those graphics. That was a little challenging for some folks. So now we're embedding that graphic alert module within the Alerts and Workflow product. All right, before we jump into the product, it certainly is worthwhile talking about pricing because it's only going to be attractive if it's affordable. So let's say that you want to start out by monitoring your Sage ERP application for an unlimited number of conditions, invoices that are overdue, customers who have stopped buying, stock that's running low, etc. You want to be able to send out alerts to an unlimited number of people, your staff, your customers, your vendors or suppliers, and you want to be able to send out those alerts via all of the methods I mentioned, email, fax, text message, web dashboard, Twitter, etc. Doing all of that for your organization is a price of $1,799. That's not a per-user price. That is for your entire organization, and that's not for an annual license. That is for a perpetual or lifetime license. Now, there are a couple of optional add to that. Maybe you've got a sales or customer service application, and you also want to monitor that sales application in addition to your ERP application. Well, additional application to be monitored is an additional $17.99. Once you hit 4 applications, it becomes unlimited, meaning that you now have a license that you can monitor every single business application that you'll ever own. If you want to add the ability to generate and deliver forms, documents, and Crystal reports, that is a one-time cost of just under $500. And if you need the workflow or data update ability, that is a one-time cost of just under $1,000. Most clients typically will start out with 1 connection, monitoring their Sage application for $1,800, and add the reports module because that's such popular functionality. So you're talking roughly $2,300 or so for that installation license cost. And if interested, a client can always order the workflow data update module at any time in the future, as well as adding the additional applications to be monitored. Now, back a couple years ago, we and an industry analyst surveyed a group of roughly 1,100 alerts and workflow clients. We actually generated an ROI calculator that is available to you if you'd like to run your own numbers through it. We wanted to find out what was the average amount of time it took a client to pay off their investment in the alerts and workflow solution. We defined that investment as the cost of the software as well as the cost of implementation services. And the average response based upon those 1,100 customers was just under 3 months, 88 days. So, last item before we jump into the alerts and workflow product, if you do happen to be a current user of an older alert solution from Sage Software, that was a solution called Sage Business Alerts. If you do happen to be an owner of that, Sage is offering you a free upgrade to Sage Alerts and Workflow. So let's take a look at this application that I've been mentioning and actually show you what it looks like. Sage Alerts and Workflow. A couple words of general technology overview. Sage Alerts and Workflow is what's called a server-based application. That means you typically install it just on a single machine. It does not need a dedicated machine. You could put it on your Sage ERP server, on your SQL Server box, your Exchange server, or even run it on a workstation. Alerts and Workflow does not need a dedicated server. Now, when you install Alerts and Workflow, you can choose to install it to store its data in one of 3 different data formats. Microsoft SQL Server is most popular, but we also support SQL Express, which is free download from Microsoft, and even Microsoft Access. There's no difference in licensing, pricing, or functionality. Now, Alerts and Workflow runs as what's called a Windows service. What do we mean by that? Well, what we mean is that you're able to identify what types of business conditions you want to monitor, and then you quite literally turn Alerts and Workflow on, and you walk away from it. I like to use the analogy of a smoke detector for your business data, because you're identifying what are those smoke signals that come from your ERP application that should warrant an alert and an automated response. You configure those, and then you turn Alerts and Workflow on. No one needs to be interactively using it on a daily basis for it to do what it needs to get done. That is monitoring and responding to the conditions that are important to you. Now, out of the box, Alerts and Workflow ships with roughly 80. That's 80 pre-configured business conditions, including all of the ones you see on the current window. This is about 12.5 of those 80. You can use those pre-configured 80 events, you can customize them, and of course you can add an unlimited number of additional business events of your own. So let's take a look at one of these events. Now, in the Sage ERP world, one of the most common uses for Alerts and Workflow is to automatically identify whenever a customer places a new sales order, and when that sales order is placed, to automatically generate an order confirmation or invoice, perhaps in PDF format, using your nice company invoice form, and automatically send that document to the customer and maybe even carbon copy the customer's account manager. That's a nice process that right now is being done manually by far too many organizations and can simply be automated. So let's take a look at how that would be done. As you can see, let me scroll my window down a little bit, make it a little bit easier for us. This event, this order confirmation event, is running hourly. So every hour, we're going to check for newly placed sales orders and then respond and process them accordingly. Now, each event has its own schedule. Those business conditions that are very mission critical and can change on a very frequent basis can be checked much more frequently, even continuously, or perhaps every couple of minutes. However, those conditions that are perhaps less time sensitive, such as a client who's changing their buying habits from week to week or month to month, maybe running events that monitor those types of conditions need only be scheduled perhaps weekly or even monthly. Now, every event has one or more queries. These are the triggering conditions that say, okay, this condition has occurred, therefore we need to respond to it. As you can see, this event is using a query called sales orders placed today. And just about everyone whom I show the alerts and workflow solution to, they say, Don, stop there. How easy is it for me as a non-technical person to design or customize my own queries? So although I could probably describe the process in 10 or 20,000 words, I find that it's actually much easier to simply show it to you. So here's the deal. In order to design your own queries or customized queries, you do not have to be a programmer. You're not writing SQL syntax or anything like that, but you do need to be familiar with an applications database schema. In plain English, you need to know what data sits where. If you have that expertise, great. You don't need any other knowledge. If you don't have that expertise, I absolutely guarantee you that the folks at DM2 do. They know these Sage ERP application databases in their sleep. Let me show you how a query would work. We've got a list of all of the tables in our Sage ERP application, whether it's accounts payable, accounts receivable, general ledger, inventory, etc. We're choosing to retrieve data for this particular query from 4 tables: our sales order tables, our customer table, and the salesperson table. If multiple tables are chosen, and by the way, all of this comes preloaded in the application. You don't have to set any of this up. If I've chosen multiple tables, Alerts and Workflow has a little wizard to allow you to link or connect those tables with each other. But I'd like to stop first on the Columns tab. Here's where you're able to pick and choose what fields of information you might wish to put into an alert message, such as the name of the item being ordered, the extended sales amount of that item, price times quantity. Is there a line item discount %, etc. You can pick and choose whatever fields that you're interested in and potentially want to put into an alert message. Maybe you want to total up all of the sales per product, per salesperson, maybe per salesperson and then within region. How difficult or easy is it to do that? Well, we provide you with a drop-down list of aggregate arithmetic functions, such as summing the value in any numeric field in the database. Maybe you want to get even more sophisticated and calculate the number of days until an invoice is due. How do you create those calculations? Again, we have a wizard to walk you through that process. If I want to calculate the difference in days between 2 dates, like the current date and a promise date or a contract expiration date, I can simply choose the function from here, and once again, Alerts and Workflow will walk me through the process of creating that calculation. I'm going to jump ahead a couple more tabs to the Filters tab, because to me, this is the most important one. Here's where I'm able to say exactly what conditions I want Alerts and Workflow to look for. This is a pretty easy event or query to identify, because if I'm going to be sending out order confirmations or invoices via email, I certainly want to make sure that my customer has a valid email address. So here I've simply specified that the customer's email address is not equal to blank. And you'll notice everything is available in plain English format from drop-down lists. My second condition or filter is an obvious one. I want to look only at those sales orders that were created today. So you can see date created is equal to today. Now, Alerts and Workflow also has the ability to identify whenever someone has changed the value of any field in an underlying application. You want to know when a customer's credit limit or credit status has changed. You want to know what it was changed from and changed to. Alerts and Workflow provides that simply through the button at the bottom right of this tab. I want to show you one last tab in the Query Designer, and it's not a pretty one. It's the SQL tab. Why am I showing you this tab? Because this is a peek under the covers in Alerts and Workflow. This shows you what Alerts and Workflow has automatically put together based upon everything that you've chosen in the preceding tabs. In other words, this is what you don't have to know what to do. Now, if you're a technical organization, if you like doing nothing better than writing your own SQL syntax, well, you might want to consider a hobby. But aside from that, honestly, you don't have to know this, because the preceding tabs will walk you through the process of identifying the specific conditions that you want to check for. Now let's take a look at what the event's going to do if and when these conditions, i.e. a new sales order, is placed. Number one, send an alert. How? Via email, fax, text message, instant message, a number of different delivery methods. We can actually just cursor over any one of these branches and get a quick glimpse at the underlying alert message. If we want to see that message in more detail, or if we want to edit it and are so authorized to do so, just a matter of double-clicking on the corresponding branch. Here are the fields of information that I can put into my outgoing alert. Here's the alert message itself. I can specify exactly what I want to have in the subject as well as the body of the outgoing, in this case, email message. The email can be configured in plain text or HTML, your choice. Kind of a fun thing here. Notice that if this email goes out to a customer, I should say when it goes out to a customer, if that customer hits reply, maybe they found an error on that invoice, that reply is going to automatically go back to that customer's sales rep. Now, other alert delivery methods I've already mentioned, faxing, paging, text messaging, etc. But you know something? If you've already got your nice-looking invoice form, which I know you do, you don't have to bother recreating what you want that invoice to look like. I have this here just to show you that this is an option. But instead, let's just tell Alerts and Workflow to use our nice standard invoice form. Let's choose how we want that form to be output, HTML, PDF, MS Word, etc. And Alerts and Workflow will automatically do all of that formatting, create that nice looking invoice for you, and automatically deliver it to the appropriate customers. You'll notice that this event even is picking up a Microsoft Word document that instructs customers on how to track their shipment via either UPS or FedEx Online. So, two last components to an event. Whom do we want to notify about this new order? Well, I would like to notify everyone in my finance group that a new order has been placed. I'm notifying them via 3 different methods, copy being FTP, Alerts and Workflows automatically saving an electronic version of the invoice in the preferred folder of our finance group. My colleague Tricia and I are both being notified by a couple of different methods, and you can see those methods can vary. But perhaps most importantly for this event are the final 2 subscribers referred to as dynamic recipients, because naturally the most important people to receive this invoice would be the customer and also the salesperson. And so those 2 are included as part of this event, so regardless of how many orders are placed or who they're placed for, those invoices are always going to reach their appropriate customer and account manager contacts. The final part of an event, which is completely optional, is its workflow actions. Do I have a fulfillment house that I need to send a file to, like a comma-separated file that contains the details of the orders that have been placed? Do I want to take the details of this newly placed order and copy it into some other application I might be using? Am I using Sage's CRM or Sales Logic's application? Do I want to go back into my Sage ERP application and actually somehow update that customer's record? So a number of different workflow actions or APIs. I do need to mention that this tab, this branch specifically, is covered under an additional layer of security. The Alerts and Workflow application itself is very security conscious, but even allowing someone access to the application, a person still needs additional access when it comes to configuring workflow, because obviously you don't want to be writing data willy-nilly into any database unless you're darn sure you know what you're doing. Okay, so let's just come back a couple of branches here and a couple of last items before we can open up the lines for Q&A. As I mentioned, out of the box, Alerts and Workflow ships with roughly 85 or so pre-configured business conditions, including clients who have not ordered in a certain number of days. But I also like to mention that Alerts and Workflow also ships with a collection of pre-configured alert dashboards. So for example, your CFO might want one dynamic dashboard that simply lists all customers who are at least 90 days overdue. That's a great dashboard for a CFO. But you know something, it might also be handy for each of your account managers or sales reps to each have their own dashboard that shows a list of just their customers who are at least 90 days overdue. If you've got 27 sales reps, you don't need to have 27 separate events or one for each sales rep. This one event, this one dashboard that you see here will dynamically create and dynamically update each dashboard for each sales rep, each dashboard being stored in a secure location for that rep. Okay, so coming back here, I see that I'm right about at my time mark. So let me just bring up one additional window that I want to share with you. And that is if you'd like to try out the application for yourself, if you want to share information about it with other folks within your organization, you can visit the website, sagealertsandworkflow.com. It'll bring you to the following site. From here, you can download and try out the application. It is the live shipping software. It'll work for 30 days, starting on the date you first go into it. You can also drill down. You might wonder, well, what are those 85 or so business conditions that ship with Alerts and Workflow for use with Sage 100, also known as MAS 90, MAS 200? You can, from here, drill down into that application, find out what the pre-configured events are, download and view additional videos, etc. All of the information on the product is available from this website. That includes the product documentation and also an online audio video training library. All of the documentation and training materials are all available at no additional cost. So even before you make any decision to purchase, you can download and take a look at those training materials and get a sense for what's involved to install and implement this solution. But at this point, Tom, let's go back to our presentation because I know we've got an additional slide here that talks about an upcoming webinar. I'll let you discuss that, at which point we can take any Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Don. Excellent job there. I just want to make everybody aware of what our next webinar is for February 14th. We're going to be covering our StoreLink product. A lot of our customers don't realize that we have a C-store management application that we can tie in and fully integrate with their Petroleum Insights accounting ERP system. So we want to cover that next month. Our StoreLink product gives you the ability to interface with your C-store point-of-sale systems, all the popular brands like Gilbarco, Wayne, Verifone. You'll be able to track all of your fuel, consumer products, lottery inventory, sales, and identify potential theft problems there. And then we do have a full price book option that gives you a centralized way to control your pricing at those stores. So shortly after this webinar is over, I'm going to be sending out this invitation that you see right here so you can register and join us for that next month. On that note, we'll open it up for any Q&A. If you have any questions, please enter them into the question window that you see at the lower right of your GoToMeeting or your GoToWebinar screen. And we'll give everyone a few minutes to put together their questions there. I know it's a lot of material, so in the event that you think of something after the webinar ends, feel free to email us at sales@dm2.com, and we'll follow up with everybody individually to answer those questions.
You know, Tom, it's interesting. I was at a recent customer conference focused on ERP, and some of the most frequently requested events, or a couple that I'd already discussed, which was the changes in buying habits was a real popular one, along with customers who had stopped purchasing. But also I found interesting even using this solution to identify duplicate records. You know, it's interesting just how much can be done with alerts and workflow that organizations might think needs either a different solution or just has to be done manually. And so there are a lot of what I would consider very creative uses, and I think the whole marketing side of alerts and workflow, being able to use the history of what customers had purchased from you over what frequency to kind of come up with promotions or ideas. I've seen and I discussed some clients who are actually setting up or using events that look for these trends or these indicators and then have alerts and workflow automatically send the appropriate marketing message out to the corresponding client. And I really like that concept of kind of not just looking for problems, but looking for opportunities as well.
Exactly. All right, we've got a couple of questions that have come in, Don. We've got 2 questions from Mary over at DeWitt. Her first question is, if we are using Knowledge Sync, will we automatically get Sage alerts and workflow? Is it part of an upgrade?
Yes, it is.
The answer to that, but go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And the answer is yes, Mary. In fact, you're using Knowledge Sync, but in truth, you're also using Sage alerts and workflow, because aside from the name on the product, the underlying technology is 100% the same. But I am answering your question with a yes, that you will get Sage alerts and workflow. And aside from the name changing, some of the other benefits will be that the maintenance and support will all be coordinated with your Sage applications. So it'll now be considered just one of your suite of Sage applications, and certainly you'll be able to avail yourself of any related Sage benefits that you get from that consolidated or centralized point of contact. But I do also want to mention very specifically that even if at some point in the future the name changes on the software that you have installed from Knowledge Sync to Sage Alerts and Workflow, you may most assuredly always come direct to VineyardSoft for support assistance. So even though that name might change, your access to us as the developers of the product for support assistance, access to our training materials, etc., that will always remain available to you.
All right, excellent, Don. Thank you. Next question from Mary is, can we use the pre-configured alerts, modify them, and save them under a new name?
Absolutely, Mary, you sure can. And in fact, the easiest way to do so, and I know I'm going to jump down to a little level of detail here, but it's so easy that I think I can spend the 12 or so seconds to detail this. If you've got a query or an event or a report or anything that you want to make a copy of and then modify, simply single-click on that item to highlight it. You'd be in the Event Manager module. And you can literally hit Control-C for copy and Control-V for paste. And as soon as you hit those 2 keys, a second copy of that item, that query or event will appear. It'll have the exact same name as the first, so you will want to go into it and change its name so that you don't get the 2 confused. The copy of the item that's made is automatically made to be inactive, so that you'll also need to activate it. But we do that very specifically so that all of a sudden you don't have 2 iterations of the same event going off. But again, Control-C, Control-V, copies any item in the entire Knowledge Sync or Alerts and Workflow database, and then absolutely you can customize.
All right, excellent, Don. Thank you. I had a question. We've had a couple of customers and prospects asked us about real-time dashboards. I know you went through and showed us that there is the Sage 100 ERP dashboard capability. How frequently can that information be updated?
That information currently can be updated every minute. We are actually, one of our development projects for this year is actually called the Alerts Portal, which is almost like a SharePoint type application, but it's an application where graphic dashboards, lists, and even non-alerts and workflow data can all be kind of consolidated and displayed. And with that, the refresh rate will even be able to go beyond every minute. So that's still finished being developed. It is going to be coming out probably towards the 2nd or 3rd quarter of this year. But for right now, the refresh rate is every minute as a maximum.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's almost real time.
It is. It's pretty darn close. I also want to mention one other item, just because since Mary asked her question, I know we've got some alerts and workflow or knowledge and customers on the phone with us today. One thing I want to just let you know about, which is 100% free, which I always like, and that is that for Sage users, which obviously everyone is, we have published, or we have made available, a collection of what we call mini event packs. It's actually a collection of about, a dozen or 18 little event packs that typically each showcase a specific use of the knowledge sync or alerts and workflow functionality. So you've heard me mention trend analysis. You've heard me mention customers who have stopped ordering. You've heard me mention duplicate checking. Those three are three examples of mini event packs that we now make available to everyone. So if you're a current user of alerts and workflow or knowledge sync, or if you end up being one, please feel free to contact either Tom or DM2, or myself, and we'll make sure to give you that collection of mini event packs. It comes with documentation, but it's just those things that are so frequently requested by clients that are a little bit more sophisticated than your average event. Again, they're available, they're free, just ask us for them.
All right. And then one last question that I had, Don. Now that Sage CRM is actually part of Sage 100 ERP, as you know, they come together, and the version of the system that we sell, Petroleum Insights, now comes standard with Sage CRM. Does that require a second connector?
For right now, it does, Tom. Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I think it's going to change, and I have to apologize for giving a somewhat wishy-washy answer, but for right now, see, we have to take our steps from Sage. And so right now, the rules that Sage and we are operating by stipulate that Sage CRM is a separate application to be monitored, therefore requires a second connection. I have a feeling that as this bundled option becomes more and more common, that may change at some point in the future. I can't say for sure, and speculation always gets me in trouble. So I should probably just stick with what is the fact as of today and shut my mouth before I get myself in trouble. So for today, Tom, it is a second connection.
Okay, and I thought that was the case just by looking at how the tree was structured on the demo, how you had that listed as a separate item there. All
Correct.
Right,
but Tom, sorry for the interruption, but you just triggered one other thought in my mind, which is the following. And it's a very important one because there are a lot of Sage ERP customers out there who have multiple companies within their ERP system. And so a question we do get from a lot of folks is, gee, I've got 3 or 10 or 17 or however many companies. Do I need multiple connections for each of those companies? And that's a very important question with a very good answer, because the answer is no. Just a single connection, so that $17.99 price point I mentioned, will allow you to connect to all of your companies, all that you have today, as well as any new ones that you may add in the future.
All right, excellent. That's a good point to bring up. Appreciate that, Don. All right, that looks like all the questions that we have for now. And like I said, I know we put a lot of information out there. Don did a really good job and covered a lot of ground there. If you think of anything after the webinar, please email us at sales@dm2.com. And I just wanted to remind everybody that today's webinar has been recorded. Once the recording is available, we'll post it along with a copy of today's presentation on the customer content page of our website, and I'll send an email out to everybody to let them know when they're available to be downloaded. Thank you, Don. You did a great job. Appreciate you.
My pleasure, Tom.
And I would like
Always a pleasure.
Oh, great. Thank you. I would like to thank everybody for attending today's Sage Alerts and Workflow webinar. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Take care.